May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. So the session has started. We would like to welcome you to the Renaissance Dam between negotiation-based settlement and military confrontation. This is our session of today. This is a conference that is being convened by Al Jazeera Center for Studies in cooperation with Al Jazeera Mubashir. So there have been statements made by the Egyptian and Sudanese leaderships that they do not want to have any military confrontation in response to the Ethiopian moves. So Ethiopia has said that it is ready to go for war by mobilizing military forces close to the Sudanese borders. So stand by, gentlemen. You're going to be introduced now. We have Mr. Safwat Az-Zayyat, and we have Mr. Ismail Amin from Khartoum. From Addis, Mr. Amari, you're being introduced now, sir. And from Washington, we have Mr. Charles Dunn. So you're being introduced as well. So welcome, gentlemen. And before we start with discussion, I would like to clarify that the discussion of the military option in this session comes from a standpoint that there were statements that were made by the different parties and that there are experts that have talked about such an option, and this is not a kind of an incentive to go to war. So before we start with the session, would like to listen to a statement by a Sisi who warned that the shares of Egypt of the Nile River these shares are a red line. So we're going to listen to an excerpt by Sisi. He said that we would like to negotiate in a way that is going to be a win-win to all parties. And we would like this discussion, this negotiation to be within international law, international conventions, and we are moving ahead with these negotiations and moves, and we are going to have more and more negotiations, and we hope that we would be able to reach a legal binding agreement for the filling of the dam and the use or utilization of the dam. But I would like to tell you, nobody can take one drop of the share of Egypt. We are not threatening anybody here. We have never threatened anybody. Always our dialogue was very rational, has always been rational, very patient. But no one can take one drop of water from Egypt because this is going to lead to instability, unimaginable stability in the region. I never talked with such a rhetoric, but I would like to say once again that nobody can touch one drop of our water. It is a red line. After these statements, I would like to clarify to our dear audience and our guests, each guest is going to have 5 minutes and would answer the question that is going to be posed in the third session, which is entitled The Possibilities of a War. So I'd like to start with Mr. Amari. Mr. Amari, the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of Ethiopia, they have said that they have good forces to deter any aggression. Is there any possibility that Ethiopia might have a war in what is happening now? If you can kindly go slowly, please.
Okay, thank you so much for having me in the first place. I think, let me put it this way, Egypt and later the Sudan have also officially made clear that they will be using any sort of action to actually halt
من أجل وقف عملية ملء السد من قبل الحكومة الإثيوبية. لكن هناك مؤشرات واضحة تتعلق بسدادات عسكرية في مصر وكذلك في السودان وذلك في المناطق المختلفة، وهذا ربما قد يعتبر على أنه مؤشر واضح لتحرك عسكري أو نشاط عسكري ربما قد يستخدم ضد إثيوبيا من أجل وقف عملية ملء سد النهضة. هناك كذلك مؤشر آخر لتدريبات عسكرية ونشاطات عسكرية وذلك في المنطقة الشمالية للسودان والتي ربما كذلك تعتبر أنها عملية استعداد. إذن هذه تعتبر تحركات في إطار الاستعدادات، لكن عندما ننظر إلى الفرضيات الواقعية المتعلقة باحتمالية وقوع حرب فيما يتعلق الأمر بنهر النيل، بإمكاننا أن نقول إنه من الصعب أن يكون هناك حرب ما بين إثيوبيا والسودان ومصر حول مياه نهر النيل. إذن هذا لا يبدو على أنه سيكون واقعيا. لن يكون هناك حرب ضد إثيوبيا أو مصر أو السودان فيما يخص النزاعات التي تجري حول مياه النيل. وربما قد تكون هناك عدد من العوامل التي تدعم هذه المحاجة التي أقدمها. أولا، هذه ليست أول مرة هددت فيها مصر بحرب ضد إثيوبيا. لقد هددوا لعدد من السنوات وذلك من أجل السيطرة على حصص مياه النيل. ربما بإمكاننا أن نتذكر المرحلة التي جرت في السبعينيات من القرن الماضي وكذلك وصولا إلى التسعينيات من القرن الماضي، حاولوا السيطرة على مصادر مياه النيل وكان هناك تهديد وكان هناك حرب انتهت بفوز إثيوبيا. المسألة الثانية هي المتعلقة بالكلفة السياسية والاقتصادية على مصر. هذه ربما قد تعتبر أمور غير واقعية كتحرك. لماذا؟ لأن مصر ستكون لديها ميزة تنافسية للفوز، وربما قد يكون من الجانب الإثيوبي كيكون تحرك من موقع دفاع. هناك 70% من السكان سيتأثرون. هذا يعني أن 80 مليون من الناس ربما قد يتم تعبئتهم إذا ما كان هناك أي حرب وشيكة ضد إثيوبيا. وإثيوبيا لديها سجل في الدفاع عن أمنها وعلى سلطتها، وعندما يكون هناك أي عمل اعتداء خارجي إذا مصر والسودان لابد أن يقوم بحساب دقيق لما قد ينويان القيام به في محل إذا ما قررا خوض حرب ضد إثيوبيا. هذه الأمور لابد أن تؤخذ الاعتبار. وهناك كذلك مؤشر آخر أن التهديد بالحرب لم تصل إلى واقع ملموس، وبالتالي سيكون من الصعوبات بمكان أن يكون هناك حرب ضد دولة من دول المنبع. لماذا؟ لأنه ببساطة ربما قد يتم تغيير مسار المياه وفي الآن ذاته فإن هذا سيؤدي إلى كارثة كبيرة بالنسبة لدول المصب. وهناك عوامل أخرى التي لابد أن تكون الاعتبار إذا ما قررت مصر أو السودان شن حرب على إثيوبيا. النقطة الأخيرة التي أريد أن أتحدث عنها، السودان لديه مشاكله الداخلية، ومن الصعوبة بمكان بالنسبة للسودان أن يقف في موقع في هذه المرحلة، لأنه سيكون من الصعب بالنسبة للسودان أن يقوم بدعم مصر إذا كانت تريد مصر شن حرب ضد إثيوبيا، لأنه لابد أن يأخذ من الاعتبار مشاكلهم الداخلية، وهذا سيساهم في الوضع الذي يجري في السودان. وفي الآن ذاته هم يحاولون
because it regulates the
عملية
flooding, the seasonal flooding for the
البناء
Nile water
وكذلك
in for the
هذا
Sudan.
يؤثر
And
على
then
عدد
once
من
upon a
الأمور
time, the water
المختلفة.
سيد
minister,
أماري
the irrigation
6
minister
دقائق
Sorry,
تجاوزت
Amari,
الوقت يعني
sorry,
تجاوزت الوقت.
Amari, sorry to interrupt you.
نعم تجاوزت الوقت يعني 5 دقائق لكن 7
You've
دقائق
taken 7
لا
minutes.
لا
We
مشكلة.
apologize.
أرجو أن تبقى معي.
So please stay with us. We'd like to move to Mr. Don. You're being introduced. Mr. Don, the Ethiopians have said that they want to wage a war if need be to fill the dam, and 1 million Ethiopians would wage such a war. But there are reports that talk about comparisons between military forces in the three countries, and these reports say that Ethiopia lacks military capabilities that would enable it to face Egyptian and Sudanese military. And we know the war in Tigray had made it subject to criticism. Can the circumstances of the three countries make them would it make it possible for them to wage war? If you can kindly go slowly, please.
Yes, thank you very much. When looking at the issue from a Washington perspective, there are real differences between particularly the Egyptian military, and Egypt has been a country that has talked about the option for the use of force. And Ethiopia, there's quite an imbalance on paper. According to the website Global Firepower, the Egyptian armed forces rank 9th in the world on a number of measures of military strength, whereas the Ethiopian National Defense Force ranks 60th. Egypt, for example, enjoys a great advantage in modern military equipment from the United States, but also from Russia, France, Germany, other suppliers. Ethiopia has primarily dated East Bloc equipment from Russia and Ukraine. Egypt also has the capability of projecting a certain amount of power at sea because it has 2 aircraft carriers, 8 submarines. And of course, the Ethiopian nation is landlocked ever since 1998 when Eritrea managed to secede. Taking a look at this military imbalance, though, it seems to me is a little bit misleading when you get to the possibility of an actual military conflict on the ground. For one thing, Ethiopia has some fairly credible air defenses with which it can defend the dam. These include most recently the Spider anti-aircraft system that was installed by Israel over strong objections from the office of President Sisi in Egypt. This could seriously hinder any kind of an aerial attack, whether it emanates from Egypt or anywhere else. And you mentioned, of course, the Prime Minister's threat to mobilize potentially millions of people. The Ethiopian government does have compulsory conscription authority. So while it would be a difficult undertaking to mobilize many people on a very short and quick basis, I don't think this is a threat that can necessarily be discounted by anyone. Any of these countries, particularly Egypt, would want to launch a strike into Ethiopia, would be facing some very formidable obstacles. Not only Ethiopian defenses, as I've just described them, but also the fact that they would have to project power over extremely long distances. In Egypt's case, it would be hundreds and hundreds of miles from very limited basing facilities in the south of the country. And Egypt, frankly, doesn't have the experience on long-range, highly coordinated operations that would make such a threat militarily credible. So, frankly, what could Egypt do if it wanted to threaten the dam? And I think any possible options are fraught with risks for Egypt, and would certainly among them would be a very messy, very bloody, and very inconclusive conflict, which would go on for a long time. One of the things Egypt could do is it could attack the infrastructure surrounding the dam. Striking the dam itself, if it were even possible, could cause catastrophic failure, which would badly affect all of the countries downstream, including, of course, Egypt, as Egypt has acknowledged itself. But there are power-generating turbines housed on both banks of the river that could be potential targets. There is the switching facility that transmits power from the turbines to the power lines to the rest of Ethiopia. And of course, there are the transmission lines itself, which might be an easier target to hit, potentially, than the dam itself. Also, there is infrastructure that services the dam, such as the road network. This could be a potential target. Egypt presumably has cyber options that it could bring if it decides that the military options are just too difficult. All of these would have to be on the table if I were an Egyptian military person trying to game out the options that I had available to me. What it comes down to, as a person from Washington looking at the military balance and the possibilities of a conflict, no matter what has been said diplomatically, is that any kind of war launched to secure water rights that would focus on the dam would be extremely difficult, possibly too difficult that it's not even a realistic option. And if something were launched, as I said, it would be potentially long, messy, and inconclusive. And it could involve other states, many of whom support Egypt, support Ethiopia, and so on. One of these is the United States. And its policy has recently shifted on this issue, away from Trump's position of strongly supporting Egypt to a much more ambiguous position. And I think the Washington position on this would be intense negotiations to head off any kind of a threat of military conflict. But that is a huge challenge in and of itself. And I don't believe that the Biden administration currently has a highly developed policy in order to address all these very many troubling factors. But make no mistake, it is very troubling to Washington, especially with an administration that wants to withdraw or reduce its military commitments in the Middle East and its diplomatic focus on the Middle East in an effort to rebalance towards Asia. And any hint of a military conflict over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam rings a lot of alarm bells in the State Department and the White House. So you can be sure that there are people who are thinking about this right now.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
سيد تشارلزان أرجو أن تبقى معي.
So please stay with us. So we'd like to move to Brigadier Safwat Al-Zayyat. So the Egyptian president said that the situation can lead to lack of stability, and he stated last year that they should not talk about a military option. Is there a difference in the Egyptian position? The brigadier, so each speaker took 7 minutes. So I would like you to respond to what our Ethiopian guest had said.
وأن حربا قد انتهت بفوز إثيوبيا. أرجو أن توضح حقيقة هذا الأمر في أقل من دقيقة قبل أن تبدأ في الإجابة على السؤال لو تكرر.
يعني ربما ردا على ما تحدث به الضيف الأثيوبي هو يحمل يعني في جوهره
Ethiopian guest had said this reflects the depth of the problem, which is an existential problem that Egypt faces. So there is a history to that, a history that dates back to the 19th century till now. There have been crises. We have to recognize that Ethiopians think that they are victorious.
عن إغراق للسودان وربما لمصر وعن ربما تغيير
So talking about the situation and the change of the flow of the Nile Dam. So these are points that we need to concentrate on. So what I would like to talk about very quickly that we are facing an existential problem. We do not want to wage a war. We would like to wage a surgical war. So, because the Nile River is very important indeed for Egypt. We do not want to lose control on the Nile River. So, we're talking about 74 billion cubic meter. You cannot talk about sovereignty when you cannot defend yourself. So, all what we want is a military surgical operation that would stop these installations in a way or another, and then we can go back to the negotiation table. And when we go back to the negotiation table, we're going to insist on second strike concepts. So we have to have the possibility, the power, perhaps to impose our conditions, and no partner would impose his conditions on us. So we have two main things. We would like to stop the installations. We would like to go to the negotiation table, and we want to underline the importance of the figures that are talked about, such as 74 billion cubic meters. So if the other party tries to threaten our existential share, then we would have the possibility to deal with such a thing, and we do not want to have any collateral damages, neither for Sudan nor to Egypt. So this is the thing that we would like to underline. I would like to start my intervention with you and to tell you that we are in an existential moment. So I would like to talk about the Egyptian nation. So we do not know the details that are coming, what is going to happen in the future, but a generation will come and it will feel the danger, the risks of this moment, and they will make us responsible. They will hold us accountable. Have we been successful in managing this period or not? But anyway, we are a nation that has fought a lot, has faced difficulties a lot. It has fallen a lot, and then it would stand on its feet and then try once again. So all our wars were just wars, and a war is a risk-taking process. So you have to appreciate the cost. We have to understand and measure the cost. So before we talk about this crisis, so we have to know what we should do. So the more the objectives are big, the more the risks are big. So there is no such more important objective than the existence of the Egyptian Ummah. But our risks should be calculated because we have to be very careful. So, because the civilians in Egypt would ask, where is the military? So there is a fine line that divides between a person that is a risk taker and a person that is rushing into certain acts or being hasty and reckless. So there is a difference between recklessness and calculated risk taking. So very quickly, I would like to talk about the history. So the time that preceded the October War in 1973, so the Egyptian president used to be in his convoy without any protection. So he was waiting for the forces to move, and he said that I have undertaken all peace initiatives. So I have done my best, and
ثم طردت خبراء السوفيت
and I expelled the Soviet expert in 1972, and I have sent my national security advisor twice to New York, once to New York and once to Paris. And Kissinger told me, you're asking for things as if you're winners, victorious, you are defeated, and you have to do something. But I have to remind you, if you cross the canal, you're going to find the American military in the eastern side of the canal.
ضيوفنا الكرام. لكن لم نذهب إلى السؤال الرئيسي في
most important question in this theme. The Egyptian president talked about the red line, and he said that he does not want to resort to a military solution. And our guest talked about the distance between the countries and lack of bases and so on and so forth. I would like you to talk about the Egyptian position, please. So very quickly.
تماما على 4 عقود حرمنا فيها
So we have to
الأسلحة بعيدة المدى أو
thank our guests from the United States of America, because they have deprived us from power projection weapons, and also we have to remember what we were subjected to in the 70s. But anyway, the world should know that we, in the last 5 years, we were able to build a long-range capability to target our objectives in the Rafale deal that we concluded in 2014, and also another deal in 2015, and also we have had a deal, the Sukhoi deal, in 2018. And the Americans, they threatened to impose sanctions on us because we try to get heavy fighters that would secure our long-range interests. I do not know what the United States of America wants. So they give our neighboring countries these capabilities, and they deprive us from these capabilities. So we have had another deal, Rafale aircraft deal, and we know that we can use the Sukhoi 35 and also Rafale aircrafts, and this can be used because this is going to be lengthy if I go into the details. Also, you have seen with us the exercises, military exercises that we have carried out, the Guardians of the Nile, and you have seen the different aircraft that have been used, and also the special forces, and also the land forces. So we can work, we can from inside Sudan and from inside Egypt, and we have the ability to target the dam, make it inoperative, and we can also talk about the second strike. So, because we have to preserve our sovereign capability through a second strike, and neither Sudan or Egypt would be impacted. So please stay with us. So we are now discussing the military option. So we do not want such a solution. We are not inciting for a military solution. We do not say that this is the only option that is available. We are just discussing maneuvers that are being taken place, military exercises, statements. I would like to move to Mr. Amin Ismail from Khartoum. Your Excellency, Major, so Sudan and Egypt have had a number of military exercises, and the
للدفاع المشترك على مصالحهم الحيوية وفي وجه التهديدات المشتركة. فهل هناك احتمال جدي لخوض السودان غمار حرب في النزاع على سد النهضة؟ قبل هذا السؤال سيادة اللواء، أنت أيضا لك دقيقة للرد على ما قاله الضيف من أديس أبابا، وتحديدا بأن السودان لا يستطيع أن يدخل في حرب لأمرين: الأمر الأول المشاكل الداخلية، والأمر الثاني أيضا أنه لا يستطيع الدفاع بالوكالة أو دخول حرب بالوكالة، وأيضا الحديث عن النزاع أو المنطقة الشرقية في دقيقة للرد على هذا، ولك 5 دقائق كضيوف الآخر.
مساء الخير، مرحبا بك ومرحبا بالخبراء والسادة
Good evening to you. I'd like to welcome the experts and the spectators.
من أثيوبيا أن السودان لا
I would
يحارب بالوكالة.
like to respond and say that we are not going to fight by proxy. We are right holders. We have the right to defend ourselves in keeping with our interests. So we have secured our situation internally. We have had a revolution. We are in the process of having a peace agreement, and we have soldiers on the eastern borders. We do not have any internal problematics. On the contrary, so it is Ethiopia that has these problematics. We have the Tigray problem, and we. So Sudan is in good shape. The Sudanese economy is in good shape. So Sudan was all the debts have been dropped in the Paris conference, and it would not fight by proxy for the interests of any other country. No, it would fight for its own benefit and interest because it had been impacted by the Renaissance Dam. So I would like to start with 3 factors that are very important indeed: the political, the military, and the economic factors. So the political factors are in favor of Egypt and Sudan, because Ethiopia has differences, disagreements. Biden has signed sanctions due to what is happening in Tigray. Ethiopia has issues with Somalia, with Kenya, with Eritrea also. And also there are tensions due to the Fashaga territory, so tensions with Sudan now. So Ethiopia has no friends if it enters a war. Internally speaking, Ethiopia has so many internal crises, such as dissatisfaction from the part of the Arom and the Tigray. Also, we have the Oromo, we have Albani Shangul, we have the Afar. All these are ethnicities that have their own demands, and Ethiopia tries to manage a crisis with a crisis. So an internal crisis with an external crisis. That is why it tries to make the Sad al-Nahda or the Renaissance Dam an intricate issue. So it tries to run away from inside to outside. So the brothers in Ethiopia have to calculate what is going to happen, because the operation scene is very intricate. So al-Nahda Dam from the border dam can be targeted with aircrafts, with many components. So this is not going to be in favor of the Ethiopian.
في ظل هذا التضعضع في ظل هذه الخلافات الداخلية، فقدت المقاتلين التيغراي 5 فرق خرجت من المعركة تماما بسبب الحرب في إقليم التيغراي. لم يتبقى لها سوى ميليشيات من الأرومو.
So the militias from the Oromo and the other factions, all of them have differences and disparities with the Ethiopian military command. And also, Ethiopia does not have any ports. So these factors all are going to contribute to the situation it is going to face in war. So if you do not have logistical capabilities, you would not be able able to win the war. So there are 3 million Ethiopian workers in Sudan. They can be expelled in 6 hours and put on the border. And this would be like a wall that would hamper Ethiopia. And there are 65,000 refugees that have come to Sudan as a result of the conflict in Tigray. Some of them are young, some of them are fighters. And we know that Sudan was neutral, and it can all of a sudden become not neutral, and there can be a front in all these areas. And Beni Shangul is the place where the dam had been created. So there are demands to join Sudan because this is a Sudanese region based on the arguments that have been used by Ethiopia itself. So militarily, politically, Ethiopia cannot do so. And economically, Ethiopia relies on the transfers and remittances by Ethiopians in the GCC, in America, in Europe. If all these lines and transfers are cut, the Ethiopian economy is not going to be stable. The same applies to investors from the Arabic Ummah or from the West. There is a meeting that is happening now in Doha.
توافق كامل في دعم مصر والسودان لذلك إيقاف هذه الاستثمارات في أي لحظة
So all of these things are going to make the Ethiopian economy collapse. So Ethiopia would not be able to stand. And all the wars that have been waged against Ethiopia, it was Sudan that was able to win. So we talk about the military doctrine very well. So we remember that from the 90s of the 20th century. And we know that conscription would not make persons have a military doctrine. So that is why a defeat is going to be for the Ethiopian, whether these are regular armies or irregular armies. So we are known that we are military men, we are experts, so there is no such thing as 100% air defense, and all the dam and all the areas around it can be destroyed. And Ethiopia should know that it's intransigence, its maneuvers that it undertakes in order to establish this dam for reasons other than generating electricity. Sometimes they talk about shares, sometimes they talk about sales of water, and this is something that is not going to be accepted by Sudan and Egypt, because this is the agreement of the countries, of downstream countries, but there are agreements, conventions, and Ethiopia should go to reason.
بهذا التحليل هو الدولة الشاملة أثيوبيا ليس في مصلحتها تخوض حربا.
It's not in the benefit of Ethiopia to go with war with Egypt and Sudan. Please remain with us, Major General Ismail. We go now to the second part of the session. We go back to Mr. Amari from Ethiopia, and I will give 3 minutes for each guest, and we give our guest from Ethiopia 1 minute to respond to what Major General Ismail said and Safwat Azani. So my question for Mr. Amari, what's the benefit of Ethiopia of a war, and does it have the capability, the military capability to do so?
Okay, thank you so much. So in the first place, I have a PhD, so I have to be called as a doctor, not a sir. First, in order to just respond to our Sudanese brother, I think there are a number of things that need to be considered. There are also anti-Hamas crisis in Sudan, and the Sudanese Prime Minister himself yesterday was saying there is a kind of military action in the Darfur, Sudan. So we think there is still an instability in the international in Sudan. And then, of course, Sudan is considered to be a kind of a government or a state which is supposed to be led by more than 2 governments. So this international crisis actually would reinforce whether there is any kind of war against any other state in the Gulf of Africa, and and then the other one is he was talking about Beni Shangul is a Sudanese region, and then I don't remember that Beni Shangul has been part of Sudan. it is part of the of Ethiopia, even though the dam is found in the Benishangul region. So it is never been part of the Sudan region. It is an Ethiopian region, one of the 9 regional or federating units of the Ethiopian Federation. But we were Ethiopia, or we were not in a position to just actually launch any kind of war against Sudan or Egypt. The Ethiopian government had repeatedly said that we're not in a position to actually wage
نقوم بشن حرب لا على السودان ولا على مصر.
We have to just simply look on amicable ways of resolving this kind of disputes.
مناسبة لحل النزاع من هذا الشكل، ولهذا
السبب or sticking to the point that an African
تجديد على أن يكون هنالك مفاوضات برعاية أفريقية
يجب
أن يتم التفاوض عليه من أجل نزع فتيل أي نزاع أو صدام ما بين أو مع أثيوبيا والسودان. إن الحرب هي ليست خيارا حتى في المقام الأول، ولا تحل أبدا أي صراع على الإطلاق، ويجب أن تكون الملاذ الأخير. ولهذا السبب الحكومة لطالما التزمت ووجدت الحل السلمي لهذا النزاع.
cannot possibly defend any kind of war that might be waged against
عن أي حروب قد تشن علينا.
They will be just using this war.
هنالك من يستخدم هذا الخطاب من أجل إخضاع الحكومة الأثيوبية لإيقافها من عملية ملء السد في المرحلة الثانية. وعلينا نتذكر أن هنالك أيضا سد آخر في السودان وفي مصر، وهذا السد هذا السدود كلها تتضرر بالحروب، فليس فقط سد النهضة، ولكن حتى السدود التي بنيت على نهر النيل على مدى الزمان سوف تتضرر من أي حرب. الحرب ليست في صالح أمن واستقرار المنطقة، ولكن الأولوية الأولى هي البحث عن حل مناسب لحل هذا النزاع وبشكل دبلوماسي. لكن إذا كان هناك حرب حتمية فالحكومة عليها أن تدافع على مصالحها القومية بأي وبكل قوتها، وبالتالي سواء حصلت أو كان هنالك خيار حرب علينا أن ندافع عن مصالحنا. هنالك أيضا الكثير من السودانيين الذين يعيشون في
إثيوبيا.
نعم، وهذا يكون في مصالح. Thank you, Mr. Amari. Thank you. The 5 minutes are up. We're giving you 2 minutes, additional 2 minutes, so that we could manage this seminar to give a chance for everyone to talk. I will go now to my guest from the United States of America, Mr. Dunn. And again, Mr. Dunn, 3 minutes. Which one of these 3 countries have the advantage to meet their benefits of the war and achieving the overall goals?
Well, look, in my personal view, I think this would be a lose-lose situation for all of the countries involved. I think Sudan might be in a slightly better position to be able to project power into Ethiopia if it came to that. Egypt certainly has long-range aerial capabilities that could be brought to bear. But it does, as I mentioned before, have some significant limits in coordinated long-range aerial operations, which would be very challenging for them to meet. Not that the Egyptian air forces are incapable, quite the contrary. They are very skilled, but there are some things that they are well practiced in and some things that they are not. And I am speaking as somebody who spent 3 years at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo as a political military officer, working closely with not only the Egyptians but the U.S. military on our military assistance program. Look, honestly, I think any kind of military strike at the GERD coming from Egypt, Sudan, or anywhere else would run huge risks. And if you're looking at it politically, one of the major risks is that it might very well inflict minimal damage on the GERD or its facilities, which would create political problems for the countries launching the particular attacks, and not necessarily harm Ethiopia all that much. So to look at it from a political military aspect, obviously the best thing to do is, as the other participants have been suggesting, an intensive period of negotiations in which all parties can come together, solve the riparian rights conflict, and avoid talk of military options, which I think are only inflaming the situation and aren't going to help anybody. Again, as far as the Biden administration goes, that is obviously the preferred solution, and one which the Biden administration would be very willing to be helpful with if another U.S. mediation effort would be welcome. And certainly, one of the things on the Biden administration's agenda would be the possibility of taking this to the United Nations, if that were seen as helpful, and engaging some more multilateral diplomacy on this issue. But then again, strictly from the military point of view, there are so many risks and dangers for all of the parties, whether it's for Ethiopia or any country attempting to launch a military mission to affect the operations of the dam, that I think those costs should be seen as overly discouraging, and hopefully will put an end to the realistic possibility of doing something along those lines.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. I will go now to Dr. Safwat Zayat, and again 3 minutes. Our guests talked from Ethiopia and United States that this war will be a costly one, and they are experts in military affairs, and also they have a knowledge about political aspect. But we still talk about military action. Can Egypt generate legitimacy if they chose to go with the military option? Now you are before an existential problem. Don't talk about legitimacy. If the state cannot defend its national interest, so this sovereignty is an empty word. We are here talking about the national security with all the meaning, and in the hours that came before crossing the canal in 1973, Sadat have cut all his contact with the world for 8 hours, no conversation when they're an existential threat, and like also talk about the war. We are about a military surgical operation. We will not target any civilian targets. We will not deal with an authority or government. We're not talking about Bani Shanqul or Tigray. We will not talk about anything else. We have a specific target, which is a facility that threatens our existence and national security for years and decades. So it's a surgical military operation to stop the action in this facility and then go back to the negotiation table. The world eyes on us to do something. I tell you, before, when Kissinger said that you are defeated and you cannot do something, what would you like from us? It's like he's sending an implicit letter. And McKinsey said a couple of days ago that Egypt have exerted or practiced patience. If he means that do something, we cannot go to the table of negotiation without doing something. And then on the table of negotiation, I will reiterate, we will not allow a volume of water that will prevent us from a second strike that will leave this nation to survive. Sorry for interruption. I would like to share with you other views, since you're talking about military action as a necessity. Some say that this military action that you describe it as surgical, some of Ethiopia said that this Renaissance Dam is also a necessity, and it's have an impact on their livelihood. So some might also say this military action that Egypt might take will have also consequences and risks on Egypt, as our guest said from the USA. As I told you, in any war you have to balance between the risks and of military action and not to carry a military action. I followed you over years. Are we about an existential threat, or we are about a military national security interest? When Ethiopia talked about development, they are talking about national interest. However, I talk about an existential threat. How do you imagine that we will leave to our generation 74 billion of water? It's an atomic bomb. If an enemy of Egypt, whether from Ethiopia or from other than Ethiopia, decide to change the form of life on our land, would do it. We cannot do that. I'm not talking to you about war. I'm talking about a military campaign. It's not a prolonged military campaign. We want the construction to cease, to stop. We cannot go back to the table of negotiation until the construction stop. Without this, we will not give any way to any opinion. So they need to stop the construction. We're not talking about attacking civilians or even attacking long-range targets. We will attack the air defense around the Renaissance Dam. I would like to say there are some air defenses from Spider, the Israeli, and they have and Banzouin Unswan that the Russian know what happened to him in Libya. So we have the capability, we have the wisdom. We don't want to expand the operation. I'm not talking about land operation, but I will support aerial Sudanese operation. We are about a limited military operation. No one will respect me if I go back to the table of negotiation without having a leverage or didn't do anything. Please remain with us, Mr. Safwat Zayan. I will go to Major General Ismail Amin from Khartoum. We are talking about a military confrontation or the option to go to military action, and our other guests from Addis Ababa and Washington in their talk said that this is not the best option. However, for Sudan, or would Sudan, or can Sudan handle the consequences of military action, or they can handle the second filling of the dam, as because our guest from Ethiopia said that there are other dams on the Nile River. The guest is reply saying that 10 years of negotiation with all these maneuvers from Ethiopia made the peaceful options useless and unfruitful, and I don't think the time now is suitable for any negotiation. We're talking about less than 1 month to the second phase of refilling. So what's going to harm Ethiopia if they have reached a binding agreement for the second, third or fourth of refilling of the dam? Nothing will harm it. They will generate the amount of water, but through a binding agreement that maintain the benefit of the three countries. But if that deal was not reached, last year we have faced water scarcity, drinking water was limited, shortage in the water, and then the rain came. And there was flows in the dam, and the water level was very high. So there were floods in Sudan, and maybe Egypt was also affected by those dams. So the damages and the harms already exist. So Ethiopia is the one leading the region to confrontation the Sudan or Egypt, and the whole world don't want a confrontation. But if we if it was inevitable,
من كميات المياه التي تأتي من ارتفاع
and if the harms
أكثر من 600 متر ارتفاع تأتي إلى
the high level of water more than 600 meters, I need to avoid those risks and carry the cost of the war if it was forced or not. However, the brothers in Ethiopia until now, and I will tell them that there's an agreement to there was an American mediation, and we were about to reach an agreement that identify all the technical issues relating to the refilling, but Sudan withdraw. So Sudan cannot, there are some engineering flaws, structural flaws in the dam, and that poses a risk in Ethiopia. Ethiopia cannot handle such risk, and we have the power, we have the capabilities. I will go now to my guest from Ethiopia, and in this round of discussion, we will give 1 minute for every guest. Professor Amari, the talk now is the description of the dam as a ticking bomb, and we can the second phase of refilling cannot be accepted without a binding agreement, and maybe the military option is
مقابل الوجود والمياه للدولتين. هل من الممكن
inevitable? Would Ethiopia go to a strategic solution or political solution rather than go into military option, or wait for the military option?
Okay, thank you so much. I think it is in the best interest of the Ethiopian government and the Ethiopian people, or in the national interest and the national security of Ethiopia, that Ethiopia was not in a position to just sign a binding agreement over the issues of the waters of the Nile, because the agreements that had been signed earlier, beginning from the 1902, 1929, 1959, had brought some kind of consequences over the use of and the utilization of the Nile water from the Ethiopian side. Therefore, Ethiopia was not in a position to actually now try to actually sign this binding agreement without taking into consideration the consequences that it might have for the future generation. And then at the same time, it is also very difficult for Ethiopia, and then both the Egyptian and the Sudan at the same time, it is very difficult to actually control the natural things of the Nile's water, because sometimes there might be some kind of dry season, and then at the same time there might be starvation, there might be an ecological imbalance, and then Ethiopia cannot control the natural water.
عندها الفرصة على السيطرة على مثل هذه الظروف البيئية، ولا يمكن أن تجبر على توقيع مثل هذه الاتفاقات الملزمة، لأنها لا تستطيع أن تسيطر على ظروفها الطبيعية. فعلى سبيل المثال إذا قلنا بأن أثيوبيا عليها أن تمر 70 مليار متر مكعب من نهر النيل، فسيكون من الصعوبة على الحكومة أن توافق على هذا، لأنها بعض الأمور هي خارج سيطرتها، فقد تنحدر منسوب المياه. Professor Amari, in 1 minute, you know, and our guest talked about if there are no binding agreement, there will be an escalation and the military option will be a viable one. In 1 minute, is Ethiopia ready, without of course signing this agreement, and in order to preserve the rights of the future generation, can Ethiopia handle such an option?
I think Ethiopia is still preparing to actually resolve this issue through peaceful settlement. But if there is any kind of war that might be launched against Ethiopia from Egypt or Sudan, it is for the benefit of the Ethiopian society and the national interest of the Ethiopian people or the Ethiopian society, that they have to just defend the national interests of the Ethiopian society. So they have to just launch a kind of a defensive war. So they are not going to just see a war might launch against the Ethiopian society and then against the national interest of the Ethiopian society. I think they are capable enough to defend the national interest of society. Because as I have said earlier, there is around 70% of the Ethiopian demography is youth, and they can be mobilized to defend the national interest. So they are
وبالتالي في النهاية إذا كان يجب علينا سندافع عن وطننا.
نعم أرجو أن تبقى معي.
Please remain with us, Mr. Amri. I go to Mr. Charles Dunn. Mr. Charles, the United States have expressed through the State Department that there are no military solution, and they have sent a convoy to the region. And as my guest said, and even Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that the Nile water is a red line. So if is war, what are the consequences of a war in this part of the area will be on the world?
Well, as I said at the beginning, I think they're very unpredictable because there are so many different parties involved, and each of these parties has different international supporters with competing interests in the region. So the U.S., for one, would not want to be drawn into a conflict, even one in which it has to politically choose sides, not get involved in militarily, which pits one U.S. security partner, Egypt, against another, Ethiopia, which the United States has historically had strong counterterrorism and security relations. Those have been strained very much by the Tigray conflict right now. But it does show you what a dilemma the United States faces in any of this. The United States would look on such a conflict as imperiling an entire range of interests, not only in keeping peace in a very volatile region, but affecting negatively U.S. security interests, particularly in the counterterrorism field, as well as potentially security of shipping and naval transits through the Gulf of Aden. So all of these things would affect Washington's calculations as it looks at the potential of a conflict. And this is exactly why the Biden administration, of course, has said it is now reviewing its policy towards the conflict. It's reviewing its policy towards aid to Ethiopia, and it is strongly backing a diplomatic solution. The last time the United States backed a diplomatic solution was during the Trump administration. It fell through at the last minute because Ethiopia basically pulled out of it. But the Biden administration is willing to attempt it again. And I think this is very much the policy line that you're going to see. In addition to the Biden administration probably privately speaking with all the parties with whom it has good contacts, urging that no military actions be talked about publicly or contemplated privately, because they, again, especially from the Egyptian point of view, it causes the potential for a lot of damage, but no real military solution. And I frankly doubt whether even an Egyptian military action could send them to the negotiating table from a position of strength. I think there's at least as big a likelihood is that an Egyptian military action would fail and actually damage their negotiating position. So I think that at least is the way Washington is looking at this whole complex of issues.
Please remain with us, Mr. Charles Dunn. I go to Mr. Safwat. Mr. Safwat, those accusations to Egypt that they are trying to destabilize Ethiopia, some may wonder, is maybe that's one of the tools that Egypt used to avoid direct military confrontation, and even the recent military exercise between Ethiopia and Egypt, in what context that comes. So the stability in Ethiopia or Egypt have a high ground, and when they send their troops, they send it for a specific purpose, for a limited campaign. We are not we would not go there to support one party over another. We would like the construction to stop and go back to the negotiation negotiation table. Then at that table we'll tell them we will not allow a volume of water that will form and ticking bomb for us. When we go to Sudan, we have limited the distance, and in the last military exercise it was in the Ubaid, which is 450 kilometers away from the target, and it was in Wad Midni, another one on 500, far from 550 kilometers from the targets. And even if the Qadaris and the Shafaq al-Kubra wa Sughra, we were 300 kilometers from the Ethiopian border and 100 kilometers from the Qadafah capital. We were aiming to get closer, because we'd rather, if we carry out a military action, to be in cooperation with Sudan, and from short distance that increase the air sorties and also reduce the uses, the cost of the ammunition, or use precision ammunition. So we would like to maybe that's a message to the Ethiopian party, but I think after 10 years of negotiations, messages have evaporated. Would you leave your next generation a dry river and a devastating life? If anyone in the whole world told me that they will not try to use this water refuge and there will be no threat and risk, I wouldn't believe it. There is a national interest for Ethiopia. We acknowledge that. However, we have an existential crisis, and there is a big difference between interest and existential. Here we insist we are not, we don't want to go into war. We want the constructions to stop. We want to go to the negotiation table. We cannot talk about negotiation when the constructions are ongoing. There are 507 or 560 meters and then become 570, and they're talking about 500 meters of water level. We don't want this game of water or rainfall. We want the construction to stop, a military action, a surgical, a limited one, and it's better to run it from short distance. We have the capability, but we have ethics. We have never waged any war that was unjust. We've been to many wars, but none of these wars were our choice. We go into war for justice. We have the high grounds, and we do. Thank you, and remain with us, Mr. Safwat. I go to Mr. Major General Amin from Sudan. We're talking about now timelines, and there's one or less than month for the second filling of the dam. Is it possible
للذهاب لحل عسكري أم أنه الحل العسكري
that
من الصعب تنفيذه في
military
الموقف الدولي والموقف الإقليمي
is around the corner, or maybe there will be an international community interference. Now both countries, Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia, have the last chance with the American mediation. The Americans came with a project of two pillars, one of them relating to the secondary filling to reduce the volume of water in the reservoir, and the second one on data or information exchange. That initiative is the last chance, and any negotiation with Ethiopia is a waste of time, and enabling Ethiopia for more installment to continue with the second filling. And even going to the Security Council today, the Sudanese foreign minister asked a special session session or exceptional session for the Security Council about the dam, and even the Egyptian foreign minister have asked to activate the American initiative. So any of those solutions need to delay the second filling or reduce the volume of the water, so we don't go to other options. So the negotiations have two principles. The first one, to reach a peaceful solution and to put an end to the conflict once and forever. And the second one is to manage this conflict, and the key is in the hands of Ethiopia, so other countries do not take military action. Before we conclude this session, we will go to the social media and read some of the comments of our followers on Twitter, Facebook, and then we give the chance for our guests to comment. The question was to our audience about the military confrontation. Is it what are the purposes of such war, and do those countries have the capabilities? Baha on Twitter said that he did not perceive a military option because all of that is a charade, and Israel, they aim to deplete the Nile water for the benefit of Israel. Wissam said he doesn't believe that a limited military operation on Nahda Dam will make Ethiopia understand. Walid said Sudan and Egypt with force can take over Ethiopia and Eritrea. And another, Abdul Tawab, said why Ethiopia is refusing to reach an agreement, why Egypt and Sudan go to the Security Council under the 7th chapter, because this is threatening the international peace and security in the region. Yusr Abu Tamim, he said that there won't be a war. The Sudanese people will not accept or agree on a war and will not accept any aggression on the Ethiopian people. The Renaissance Dam will not affect neither Sudan or Egypt, and it have many benefits on Sudan. Another, Awada, said no, neither Egypt or Sudan can go into military confrontation with Sudan. This is only for media or publicity. And another said that the Renaissance Dam is for the purpose of generating water. Their water is not feasible. Now we go to Mr. Amare, Professor Amare. Professor Amare, how do you comment on what we have heard from our people on the from our audience in social media?
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, quickly let me make three most important points before concluding the entire conference. The first one is the Nile water or the Nile issue is an existential issue to Ethiopia because it lives upon the completion of the dam. We believe that it actually lifts millions of Ethiopians out of abject poverty, food shortage, and food starvation. And at the same time, it also believed to take out more than 70 million people out of darkness because of lack of adequate electricity. And then it is going to be an essential matter for adequate Ethiopia. And then we actually wanted that our Sudanese and the Egyptian brothers to actually understand the existentialness of adequate the Nile to adequate Ethiopia. Whereas on the consequences of the war, I have two most important points to make. And the first one is would be a very significant and catastrophic war to the riparian states, not only to that of Ethiopia, Sudan, and that of Egypt, but it can be also a catastrophic war to the entire riparian states of that of the Nile. And then at the same time, secondly, it can also be considered as a regional war because it might distribute the entire regions of the Horn of Africa, Eastern Africa, the Greater Horn, the northeastern parts of Africa, and then the Arab world at the same time. And then if you remember, for example, the Arab League has supported Egypt and Sudan in their war against what Ethiopia in their June.
Professor Amari, we're sorry for interrupting you. We just wanted a comment from you on the social media, but you had the chance to hear your last comment. Thank you very much. Now we go to Mr. Charles. Mr. Charles, how do you comment on what you have heard on the social media participation? In 1 minute, please, Mr. Charles.
Yeah, there were two comments that struck me, and I have to say, I thought the comments from social media were all very interesting and well taken. I'd like to highlight two, though, as I said. One respondent said that a military operation will make Ethiopia understand the risks of what it's doing. But another one commented that all this talk of war is a charade, just presumably to rattle cages and make people sit up and take notice. So a diplomatic solution might be possible. I think, and I don't want to take sides in this, but I think people might underestimate the resolve of Ethiopia on this issue, just as much as Nile water is a red line for Egypt and other countries, including Sudan. It's really a red line for Ethiopia as well. They see it as a key to the national development, which is a pretty big deal for them, and so they're not going to give this up easily. This suggests that a way around talk of war has to be found and has to go through a diplomatic solution. Ethiopia's had some experience with an Egyptian invasion before. This was in 1874 to 1876, in which Egypt tried to create a Nile empire that would include the source of the Nile. It didn't go well. The Egyptians were eventually defeated in a military action that nearly brought the government of the Khedive down. History rhymes if it doesn't exactly repeat itself, and I think this is an important lesson for the future. I do tend to agree more that
Mr. Charles Dunn, again, your 1 minute is up, and we're sorry for interrupting you. Now we go to Safwat Az-Zayyad. Mr. Safwat, what are your comments on the social media, and maybe would like also to comment on what we have heard from other guests. Egypt was not defeated military, but every party need to explain from its criteria who the triumph and who is the loser. Egypt will live with wars. Sometimes they struggle, but they stand up again. This is a just war. We need to stop the construction of the dam. We want to go back to the negotiation. We need to this reservoir to be harmless to all the countries. The state sovereignty without power means nothing. We don't want a land action, and we don't want to harm the Ethiopian regime. Our operation will be surgical, military surgical operation. We need to build an expeditionary force that the Soviets have prevented us from in the 50s and 60s, and the US has also prevented us from that over 4 decades. They prevented us from this right to have a long-range airplanes or to air-to-air refuel capabilities. Now we have the capability to work from our lands and also to work from the Sudanese land. But again, all our wars were just, and we will leave to our coming generation the rights they deserve. Now we go to Major General Amin from Khartoum. Mr. Amin says that maybe Ethiopia, if enter into war they will go with their tail behind their legs, because Ethiopia needs to understand that the decision of war may be in their hands now, but departing or leaving that war is not their option. Now I would like, at the end of this seminar, to tell the audience that discussing the options of war, that does not mean or that does not suggest that war is inevitable, but we are reviewing the prospects of the war. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our third session of the seminar under the title Bloody Water and the Implications of War on the Region. We thank our guest Safwat Al-Zayyat from Egypt, and from Sudan, Major General Ismail Amin, and thank you very much, and also from Addis Ababa, Professor Amari, and we would like to thank our guest also from Washington, Mr. Richard Dan. Thank you all for being with us, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll be with you after a while in the fourth session, so please remain with us.